Hey friends, welcome back to the Big Talk podcast. I'm your host, Tricia Brouk, founder of the Big Talk Academy, award-winning director, producer, and author. And this is episode 560. Today, I am joined by the amazing, talented, and good friend of mine, Miriam Schulman. Miriam has been a professional artist for over 20 years and lives her creative life with gratitude in New York's backyard. After witnessing the 9/11 terrorist attacks, Miriam abandoned a lucrative hedge fund job to work on her art full-time. Rejecting that starving artist myth, her watercolor and mixed media paintings have been seen on NBC, published in magazines and books, and collected worldwide. In addition to creating art, Miriam teaches other artists through her online courses, hosts the Inspiration Place podcast, and is the author of the book Artpreneur, the step-by-step guide to making sustainable living from your creativity. Let's do this. Miriam, welcome to the Big Talk podcast. I am so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's always an honor to chat with you, Tricia.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure. For any of you who do not know, Miriam and I both live in New York City. And I was so delighted when you made the move into the city for selfish reasons so that we could have lunch together and I could come to your table gatherings, which are always so delightful. So I'm seeing you in a virtual space, but I love knowing that you're just uptown a couple of blocks. Yeah, I'm waving to you as well. Amazing.
Is this going to be on video, or they don't get to see any of these antics that I'm like, any of my sign language antics?
Oh, we're going to see all the antics.
Oh, okay. All right.
When this goes to YouTube, there will be an antic zone.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well, we're going to talk about your amazing book, Artpreneur. Before we do, however, I would love for you to take us back a little bit. Your backstory as to what brought you to this moment in time. And it's in your book, but I would love for the listeners to hear it from you first.
Okay. So, it's always like, where do I put the pin in this story? I really always wanted to be an artist. And by always, that was since the fourth grade. My fourth grade teacher declared me an artist, declared me the class artist. I really don't think I exhibited any talent. I think she honestly just felt sorry for me because I was the new kid in town. I was a major nerd. I did not fit in at all. And that was an easy thing she could do for me. But when she said that, I chose to believe her. And it was like I took on that identity. So there was something in me that felt like, oh, I should be an artist. And as I grew older, as we do, we become conditioned to, well, this is as I'm being told, you're not going to make money that way. And coming from a single parent household, my father passed away when I was young. My mother remarried. I just didn't feel I had the luxury if that was true. So I took the more practical route. I took a job on Wall Street because I figured if the point of working was to make money, at least I should go where there's lots of it. And after 9/11 happened, I took that as a sign from the universe not to continue in that world.
Let's go back a little bit. I have read your book and I also just listened to the audiobook because I wanted to hear it again in your voice. And I'm so glad that I did because that book made me laugh out loud pretty much the entire time I was listening to it because of how you delivered it and not because of 9/11. That was a very clumsy segue. Your book and how you read it is masterful. It's like listening to a very talented actor and comedian. Going back, however, you talk in the book, you write in the book that you worked in the World Trade Center. And during the first bombing, and I was here, I lived in New York, I've been here for 30 years. The city really didn't take it very seriously. And clearly the people you worked for didn't take it very seriously. There was a bomb that went off in the basement garage. And yes, it was all over the news and they evacuated down lower Manhattan and all those things, but we didn't really take it seriously. And one of the things that stood out for me, many have stood out for me in this book, but one of the things that stood out for me is your awareness of what's going on here. We're just staying at work. A bomb just went off in the basement parking garage, and we are continuing to work.
Yeah. So the part you're talking about in the book, that was 1993, and that was my first job out of grad school. So it was really my first job. So I hadn't been jaded yet or conditioned in that way. Like the work culture of Wall Street and maybe much of New York and maybe the theater world as well. It's like you work no matter what. The show must go on. You work no matter what. But I hadn't gotten that memo yet. So when the power went out in the Trade Center, I actually was not up at my desk. I was in the cafeteria, and nobody told us what was going on. We thought it was a Con Ed failure. And for those who don't live in New York City, like a power failure. So my friend and I, we actually walked up 37 flights of stairs to return to our desks because we thought, okay, we're going to go back to work now. And when I was there, you could see out the window what was happening. Now we could see helicopters circling the building. So it's not like just, oh, newsflash, this is happening. No, you could see. It was like a war zone. You could see people smashing the windows, smoke pouring out of the towers. It was not as horrific as 9/11. It wasn't quite that. I think there were people who passed from that, but it wasn't
Yes.
quite the 9/11 event. But still, it was like a war scene. And when I learned the truth, I didn't want to be there. It's not even so much that I felt in danger. I just couldn't work knowing that this was happening. So I slipped out the back door and left. And that's why when 9/11 did happen, I understood that there were 20 minutes that passed between when the first plane hit and the second plane hit, and they didn't move to evacuate the nearby buildings. Well, I lived in that world. So that's why it was very personal to me when 9/11 happened. Yes, I wasn't working at the Trade Center at that time, but I knew if I had been, the carelessness with which they held um, human capital. So that made it like unbearable for me to go back. The same way I didn't want to even be at my desk when the first bomb went out. I did not want to go back.
Yeah. This part of the book is very, very candid and very powerful. And having lived and been in New York during that time, it resonated with me very deeply. And like you said, the show must go on. And during that time, I actually performed in a show a couple of days after and was wondering why we were doing this.
Yeah.
And so we did that in order to serve the audience who needed some art, which takes me back to the power of art, and you now giving people a way, a methodology, very clear tactical things they can do to become these artists and make money doing it.
Well, here's the thing, Tricia, is that in times of crisis, 9/11, World War II, the pandemic, the time we're in now, the world really does need art. It really, really does. And the thing is about my book is that people can't enjoy your art, whatever kind of art form that is. They can't benefit from it unless they know about it. And
Right.
that's where the marketing comes in. So it's beyond what marketing your art, your craft, your music, your dance, your voice, whatever it happens to be. It's beyond what it will do for you personally. You are doing a service to the world. And so marketing is part of that. It is part of sharing your art with the world. So your world cannot benefit from your art if they don't know about it.
I love that. And you talk about that in the book. And I also want to highlight the one of the things that you hit so heavily and so beautifully over and over again in the book is mindset. And I went in knowing I was going to enjoy the book and knowing I was going to enjoy it because you're my friend and you're very smart and you're very funny. And I knew I would enjoy it. But the way you talk about mindset in relationship to a starving artist and the mindset of an artist who just needs to be never paid for what they do, that was awesome. I'd love for you to speak a little bit for our listeners about the importance of mindset and why we need to drop the story of why starving artists are sexy.
Yeah, it's not even true, first of all. I think Jeff Goins did a great job of outlining that in his book Real Artists Don't Starve. He talks about Michelangelo, died a very wealthy man. Uh, but I'm always bringing up Michelangelo as well, lots of times, because some artists will come to me and say, well, that's not being a real artist if I'm doing what my customers want or if I'm doing it for the money. I was like, well, come on, Michelangelo, he painted the Sistine Chapel because the Pope paid him to, not because it was his idea. It was not
Right.
his idea. He just wanted to sculpt sexy Greek gods. That's what he wanted to do. So he was not into doing the whole ceiling and the judgment day and all of that. He did it because the Pope paid him to do it. So, and there doesn't make you any less of an artist. Now, in terms of mindset, there are so many different layers. There is the layer, and unfortunately, I think society and art schools are very guilty of promoting this whole real artists don't care about money, real artists need to starve, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also the layer of the socialization of women and people who are part of marginalized communities, women of color, men of color, who feel they need to play small in life to be safe. And
Mm.
unfortunately, that's going to show up in their art and in their marketing. And I see this over and over again that my clients, people of color, have a much harder time overcoming not only starving artist mindset, but poverty mindset. So they have a whole different level of conditioning that they need to play small. It's not safe. And a lot of women have been, especially in the United States, we've been trained with that puritanical, we're not supposed to desire sex. We're not supposed to desire money. We're not supposed to desire power. So it's not, socially correct for us to want money for our art.
I love everything about what you're saying, Miriam, and the way you talk about it in the book and the way you read it for the listener is very empowering, and it gives us permission to drop the story. So thank you for that. The other thing I want to talk about, which I love, is how you talk about love your buyer.
Mm, yes.
Talk a little bit about that. I loved that you pointed out you need to love your buyer.
Okay, so this is something I introduced very early on in the book Artpreneur. I call it the belief triad. So the belief triad, there's three beliefs areas that you need to have work on and have a very strong mindset around. Two of them we've heard about in other other books. So believe in yourself, believe in your art. But I don't know that I've ever heard anybody talk about you have to believe in your customer, in the buyer. And let me give you an example of how this shows up. So in the movie Pretty Woman, um, Julia Roberts, she's a hooker, and Richard Gere wants to have her as a ladylike companion, but not dressed like a hooker. So he says, "Here's my gold card, go shopping." But the mean salespeople in the boutiques won't wait on her. Why? Because they don't believe in her as a buyer. They don't believe she has the money. Now, we all think we're not the mean salesperson in Pretty Woman. But so many times, Tricia, and I know I've done it too. It's like, how many times have you offered like your middle package or your small thing instead of the big price thing because you don't believe in them? Now, here's the thing: when it comes to an investment decision, the investment decision could be they want to sign up for, the Salon Academy, or they want to spend $10,000 on an artwork. They're not trying to decide if Tricia Brouk's Academy is worth it. They're not trying to decide if my painting is worth $10,000. What's going through the customer's mind is whether or not they are worth investing $10,000. And this is where belief in your buyer comes in, because you have to believe in your buyer more than they do. You have to believe in them. You have to believe that they're worth $10,000. You have to believe that if they go through your Speak Academy, that they're going to get that result. That you have to believe in it, because if they sense your uncertainty, they're gonna feel uncertain, and the brain hates uncertainty. That's why we're all such a mess during the pandemic. We hate it. So you have to be come with that strong mindset that you believe in your buyer and that you are and work on being a certain person who makes decision. You expressing any kind of indecision about your pricing, indecision about what you're doing, they won't know why, but that will repel them, that indecisiveness.
That's so amazing. And this is exactly what we talk about in the big talk is if you're not clear with who you are on stage, the audience won't believe you and trust you, but they won't know why. So that sense of self and that clarity is so important. I love this. I also love how, as somebody who is always observing performance and speaking, I love how you speak. And I've never had a chance to experience it because we're just having lunch across the table from each
Right.
other and I'm not paying attention on that level. But you are really a fantastic speaker.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're
Yeah, but
welcome.
usually when I have so what Trisha's talking about is I like to be a Gertrude Stein. That's how I imagine myself. I don't know if I ever told you that's what I think I'm doing. And I invite people over. And what's fun for me is I kind of like to sit back a little bit and I don't showboat as much in those situations. But yeah, I do enjoy being a drama girl.
It's amazing. And we'll put the links in the show notes where you can get the book and definitely get the audiobook as well. The other part of the book that stood out to me is a few things, but silence does not mean no.
Oh, yes.
And that goes back to the mindset as well. Talk to us a little bit about how you help your clients navigate the silence.
Okay, so this is something that I even long before I was coaching, this is something I taught my kids was you have to make people say no to you. Silence is not a no. And it goes back into that belief. Do you believe in yourself? Do you believe in your art? Do you believe that the buyer would benefit from what it is that you're selling? Yes, yes, and yes. Then you keep asking and offering it to them. So many times I'll have a client be like, "Oh, well, I sent the thing and I didn't hear from them." I was like, you don't know what situation they open their email, especially now that we get our emails come to our phones. They could be at the grocery store and their 4-year old's having a tantrum in the aisle. You don't know what's happening. You don't know if somebody just died in their life and this is not important to them right now. So silence never means no. So you persist and you believe in it until you've gotten a yes or a no from the other person.
And what would you say to somebody who's like, oh, I don't want to bother them, or it makes me feel uncomfortable reaching out again?
Yeah, that is like something. So that is what when you talk about the mindset in the book, there's so many times where I say, okay, starving artists think, and then I have so much experience talking to people about that they think they're bothering people. So this goes back to really um, our brains have evolved to keep us safe. Our brains haven't evolved for goal achievement. So anytime that we feel uncomfortable, it will feel like it's a dangerous situation. And our brain really hasn't evolved to the point that we really understand the difference. Intellectually we do, but not on that cellular level, that the difference between just getting a no on somebody not buying your art and you're going to be ousted from the tribe, which means you're going to starve over here. That whole, we've been evolved to be a tribal. That is the thing that we don't want the most is to be ousted. So anytime your brain feels any kind of fear, what's going to happen is your brain is going to come up with all the reasons why doing that uncomfortable thing is a terrible idea, like the worst idea ever. And the smarter you are and the more creative you are, the better you'll be at coming up with these reasons why this thing won't work. Now, it can range from anything like, well, I don't want to bother people, which is the, by the way, that if that's your reason, that's not, you're not being creative enough, to like something that's very convincing and creative. And the problem with this, Tricia, you hear, I'm not saying excuses. I'm not saying, oh, you're going to come up with excuses why not to do this. No, because these all feel real. These stories are real to you. So they're not excuses, they're doubts. They're thoughts that are the doubts in your mind about why the thing that won't work. Or the flip side of this is sometimes you're afraid it will work and you're having stories about why that would be bad. I won't be able to handle all those clients, or if I make a lot of money, I won't have friends anymore. So whatever it is, the stories you're coming up with about why this thing will be a bad idea, whether it will work or not work. So we have fear that leads to doubt. What happens next? What happens next is that we are going to want to find out all the things to do so that this bad thing we're imagining won't happen, so that it won't work out badly. So a lot of people will go into procrastinating mode. They will do all the research to make sure that they don't fail. And then they end up being more confused. And some people they'll just indulge in, I don't know how to do this. So it's like the confusion or the overwhelm. And sometimes it's a mixture of both, because what's going to happen when you do all the procrastinating, eventually you'll hit upon a step where you're going to you'll come up with more reasons why that thing is a bad idea. So we have fear that leads to doubt that leads to confusion and overwhelm. And that's what leads to not taking those actions, not taking inspired action. So fear that leads to doubt that leads to confusion, overwhelm, that leads to procrastination. And then what ultimately happens is we feel guilty because we're not taking action towards our dreams.
And to highlight what you said earlier is, when that happens and we're in a state of total paralysis, you're preventing your art from actually being of service to global humanity. Imagine that song that's not being written. Imagine that painting that's not being painted, that dance that's not being choreographed. That is the missed opportunity here. And from one artist to another, I could not live without going to the theater every week. I could not breathe without seeing the Alvin Ailey dancers outside of my window. And so that's the thing I want you listeners to really think about, is get this book, Artpreneur by Miriam Schulman, and start understanding that you can not only make a living as an artist, but make a kick-ass living as an artist. And you have actionable steps inside of this book. And the other thing that you do so well is, at the end of each chapter, it's what artists need to believe and marching orders. So you don't have to be alone if you're listening to this and you desire to be an artist and to make money doing it.
Yeah, so the marching orders, by the way, that came about from my last chapter. So this is a theater crowd. So I grabbed that from the whole idea of Waiting for Godot. A lot of those lines that are in the last chapter, Waiting for Godot does play a role in the last chapter. But from that play, he talks about not blaming your boots. And so that's why I say marching orders. And I even end the chapter that way. Don't blame your boots, because that's blaming the circumstances. And you just keep marching forward anyway.
That's beautiful. I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing that. You also, going back to what you said about being creative in your thinking, there's a chapter on not giving out business cards. There's a chapter, which I love. And also this whole idea of um, turning getting emails on its head. Stop asking people to subscribe to some PDF. Just ask them to join your list so that you can send them amazing content. And I thought, well, yes. Why aren't we all doing that? Why aren't we all just saying what it is? I'm going to send you an email that hopefully will make your heart sing every week. Or I'm going to send you an invitation to the next show that I'm doing so that you can see the next piece of art you're going to buy. I loved your point of view there. How did you get to that place?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple of things that you're saying. There's a couple of things you're saying there, and I want to unpack a few of them. So one of them where you're saying stop handing out business cards. So there's a whole chapter on how I basically use dating as an analogy for building your list. And just to make that long story short, it's basically not a good strategy if you're dating to go into a bar and start handing out your phone number, right? But
It's a little
that's what we're
dangerous.
doing when we're trying to give out business cards. So what I say it is what you want to do is get their information and then be in control of that. Now, we all have fantasies. I know I've had them, where you're at the art show and it was a great art show because you handed out a lot of cards. No, because people are throwing them out. That's just their way of getting away from you. Do you have a card? So, what you're also talking about is the easiest way to get people onto your list as an artist, as a performing artist, as a visual artist, is just to say, would you like me to invite you to my next show? And then people will say to me, wait, but I don't have a show. I was like, eventually you will. And you're basically saying, if you join my list, I'll make sure you get invited to whatever that one is in the future.
So good. So, so good. I love the book. For everyone who's listening, Artpreneur, you can get it on Amazon. We'll put links in the show notes as well. Anything else you would love to share with us about this amazing book?
Oh, thank you so much. So just like I said before, and that is, there's so many times where you're taking the actions and you're not sure if it's working. But if you keep taking that inspired action steps, not listening to those voice of doubt, question his thoughts. Is it really true that you're bothering somebody? Just keep taking one step in front of the other, not marching in place, but marching forward, and you will get to your goal.
Yes, thank you so much for reminding us. And I hope that there's so many artists listening to this who are going to take that inspired action and definitely get this book. It will help you. It will be your support system while you're working through all of those limiting beliefs. Miriam, are you ready for some fast talk?
Yeah.
All right. What's your favorite book right now?
Ah! Okay, this is so embarrassing, but when the pandemic started, I decided to reread the Harry Potter series. Okay, that was for the second time. And then, the pandemic wasn't over in June of that year. Okay. And then when I started writing my book, I needed something to procrastinate with. So I read the entire series again. I'm talking about books 1 through 7.
Wow.
And I kid you not, right now, that's what I'm listening to on Audible is Jim Dale. I'm just like, I hate to admit it, but let's be honest.
I
It
love it.
just, I like the fantasy, and I'm old enough that I don't always remember what happened. It's like,
That's hilarious. Who is your favorite speaker and why?
okay, favorite speaker. Um, oh my goodness. Okay, I want to say Brene Brown, but that sounds so cliche. So can I come up with somebody else really fast? Just give me
Yes.
a minute. Give me a minute. Give me a minute. Okay. Trying to think who I've seen at the 92nd Street Y. Like, is there anybody else I can give? All right, fine. I'll be boring. Brene Brown.
That's okay. That's all right.
Okay.
How do you memorize?
Oh, do I have to? Yeah, that's
That's a
right. You
good
said
answer.
you might have to answer to do that.
That's a good answer. Do I have to? I love that as an answer to that question. All right, moving on. What do you do the day before you speak?
Okay, so I know you're not supposed to have dairy, and you're supposed to eat apples, right? And
I
I
have
get
no
lots of
idea.
I no, that's what they told me when I read my audiobook. I learned that day, eat an apple.
That is fascinating. I've never heard that before. No
Yeah, it's
dairy,
supposed to
no dairy. True, but
the dairy
apple.
you've heard, the apple eating an apple gets rid of the phlegm in your throat.
Interesting. Good.
Okay. Ooh,
Okay.
cool. I
I
taught you something. Okay.
learned something amazing. And what podcast are you currently obsessed with?
Okay. Oh, I love Julia Louis-Dreyfus's podcast, Wiser Than Me. Have you listened to it?
Obsessed. Obsessed.
So
Yes.
good.
It's so good. Yeah. The first one with Jane Fonda was incredible.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I adore you. Thank you so much for being a featured guest today on the podcast. Where can our listeners get in touch with you?
Okay. Well, if you like what you heard today, come find me on the Inspiration Place. Tricia's been a guest. I'd love to have you over there. So wherever you're listening to the big talk, go find the Inspiration Place podcast.
Yes, it is an amazing podcast as well. And thank you so much. We will put all of this in the show notes. Thanks for dropping in with us today. And if you loved this episode, first of all, get Miriam's book and then also share this podcast with your friends, rate and review on iTunes. Let me know what you thought about it on Instagram. And if you're watching this, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell on the YouTube channel so that you get access to the rest of the new videos. Thank you so much, everyone. And remember, your voice matters. Big love.